Christian Parenting.
Welcome to the Called to Love podcast, where we discuss all things adoption and foster care and dive into the practical, the clinical, and most importantly, the biblical perspectives to help you and your family thrive. I'm Summer Colbert, adopted mom, director of adoption and foster ministry, and champion for the Arkansas Baptist Children and Family Ministries. Adoption and foster care aren't just a process. They are both unique invitations to go on a journey with the Lord, where you will experience life-changing opportunities to grow in your faith and learn to love in an entirely new way. One thing is for sure, being called to love means you will never be the same. Hey, Called to Love families. Well, I don't know about you, but summer is in full swing at my house with camps and sports and all the things. And in the midst of it all, we're trying to find moments as a family and with each of our kids individually, as life just doesn't stop because we're on summer break. It's something that I've learned in recent years as an adoptive parent is that disruption to routine or schedule can actually create some discomfort in our kids, and that can manifest through some really challenging behaviors. So, that being said, I felt like this month was a great time to revisit my mindful parenting series with my good friend Kelly Hamilton from earlier this year. So, for the next 4 weeks, I want to dive into a little bit of a refresher on attachment and mindfulness, and together lean in at how we can be attuned to our kiddos in the midst of a not so normal routine. And I want to cap off the month with a little update from our family and some lessons that we've learned in putting these principles into practice at our house, the good, the bad, and the, I don't want to say ugly, but let's just say opportunities for growth. So without further ado, here is Mindful Parenting with Kelly Hamilton. Welcome back, sweet families, to the Call to Love podcast and the final episode in our series for the new year on mindful parenting. I pray that you have been so encouraged as our guest, Kelly Hamilton, has shared with us her expertise in all things attachment and mindfulness. And today we are going to talk about again, just going to tell on myself, friends, it's a real struggle over here, and that is reactive parenting and the why behind it. And if we're honest, I think understanding everything that we've learned up until this point, we have a little bit of a better understanding of why we default the way that we default and why we might behave the way that we behave. And so some of that is reactive parenting that we always go back and we kind of kick ourselves for. And it is something that we have to learn to apologize for and humble ourselves for. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Kelly, welcome back. Thank you for being here for this conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So good. All right. I've said it. We've all done it. We've lost our cool with our kids and we have displayed reactive behavior in front of them or towards them. And we've always regretted it and wanted to backpedal and take it back. And so as we dive into this topic today, where do we begin with reactive parenting?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, acknowledging that we have all done it.
Yeah.
And, hey, this is where we are all at. And so how can we pivot to a healthier response? When we talk about reactive parenting, what we're talking about is in times of stress and dysregulation, it's the impulsive, automatic, and oftentimes overreactive response to our child's behavior.
That's a perfect definition. Absolutely. And it is so true. And there's so many factors that contribute to that. And we've kind of talked about that over the last several episodes of things that dysregulate us and things that we need to be mindful of, our attachment styles that may or may not be more prone to reactive behavior. Hello, I'm raising my hand. And so why, Kelly, is it important for us as either foster or adoptive parents or just parents in general to understand reactive behavior in both ourselves and in our children?
I think it's so important. And I think you're right. It is for all parents.
Yeah.
Whether or not you are parenting biological children, maybe a child who is a relative of you, but you're not the mother or the father,
Right.
or foster adoptive kids, any child, any parent, this does apply to. And, for myself, I have found that when I react to either of my kids, it is oftentimes from a place of that anxious attachment that we talked about.
Yes.
So I'll tell on myself, I had this situation where my daughter got pink eye and she had to do those lovely medication drops.
Ugh.
I thought, no problem, no big deal.
Yeah.
And so she had taken a nap, and then we needed to leave to go pick up my son from school.
Right.
And so I wake her up. I'm like, hey, let's do these drops real quick. No problem. Right. And she freaks out. She does not want to lay down and have me drop medicine in her eye. And if you think about it, laying down with a parent over you is a pretty vulnerable
Yeah.
physical position, right? It can be
Right.
scary. And
Yeah.
she was like, are they going to hurt? I'm like, they might sting a little. Well, she didn't want that.
Right.
So she starts to escalate. And then I start to escalate. And I am reacting. And I'm like, I'm sorry, we have to leave right now. You
Right.
have to do this right now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like I was going into the also avoidant of like, hey, suck it up. We got to do this and get going. Um, and she just escalated further. She's crying. And I'm like, baby, we have got to get your brother. And inside, I'm like, if we're not on time, his anxiety is going to spike. He's going to think I'm not coming.
Right.
So I am just kind of spiraling in this.
Yes.
And finally, 30 minutes later, I'm like, do you not trust me? Lay down.
Yeah.
And she goes, no, I don't.
Ouch.
Ouch. Yeah. I immediately backed up. I was like, I am so sorry. We can do this later. Let's get in the car. What do you need to get in the car?
Mm.
Let's get water, a snack. Do you want a stuffy?
Yeah.
And I had to go back and repair that because I was responding to her in a very overreactive way.
Right.
Because I was responding to an anxious, like I was kind of anxiously leading in that moment from my anxious attachment because I was afraid that if I didn't show up, then my son and his anxiety would spike. He would think I wasn't coming. So, I mean, it was just this huge spiral.
Yeah.
So it was a moment of I had to pause.
Yeah.
I had to stop. And unfortunately, it came from my daughter saying, no, mom, I don't trust you right now with those eye drops. And I had to come back. And I'm like, later came back and I was like, I'm so sorry. How can we do this to where you feel safe and that you're ready to take this medicine?
Yeah.
And then we figured it out. But oftentimes that reactivity, it is that automatic. It's the impulse.
Yeah.
And when we are reacting to our kids and not being mindful of why
Yeah.
and where that's stemming from, it's just not going to work out well. It's going to cause a rupture in the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the point I want to make with this story, because I think that's a great example, Kelly. Like, you weren't being a bad mom in that moment. Like, you were trying to give your child the medicine that she needed for her body to heal. You were trying to responsibly leave on time so that you could pick up your son so that he wouldn't feel anxious or worried or scared that mom wasn't there. So like you were doing it all from a good place, but yet the urgency factor, and that kind of tunnel vision of got to get it done, is what kind of was the springboard for jumping into that spiral. And I can so relate to that. And there's things in us, and as we talked about in our previous episode, especially for those of us who struggle with that particular attachment style. Like, if I don't get it done, that's a trigger for me. I'm like, wait a minute. I said I was going to do this. I said I was going to check this box. I said I was going to get it done. And so that triggers me to then react. And then it just kind of spirals from there. And I feel like this word trigger, it's become a buzzword. And sometimes it's flippantly thrown around to the point where I'm like, psh, psh, like, get over it, kind of put your big girl britches on kind of a thing.
Avoider.
Yes, avoid.
Yeah.
I'm totally just told on myself, right? But it's thrown around kind of as the excuse to lose our cool. And yet there are things that do trigger in us, and they trigger responses that we might not anticipate, and we're spiraling before we know it. And so there's so many factors to that. And so I want to camp out on that just a moment, Kelly. Help us better understand the factors centered around a reactive response. And what I mean by that, for example, and you can kind of take this whichever direction you feel comfortable, but brain chemistry, overstimulus, the physiological response that happens. I mean, there's so much going on in our bodies, and it's like kind of snap of a finger and all of a sudden we're there. So take us into that a little bit, as if we're triggered into something.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have to look at the basic human needs. Are we hungry, thirsty, tired? And in the story I just told about my daughter had fallen asleep on me, and I didn't have any access to my water. That was just out of arm's reach.
Yeah.
I had not eaten at all in like 4 hours because, again, I was caring for her. Then she fell asleep on me, and I didn't want her to move her.
Right.
And then I was stressed out because I was late.
Right.
So all of those were triggering that, very overreactive, automatic response that was completely unaware and unengaged with my daughter's needs
Right.
because I was concerned about me,
Yes.
right? And it was just this automatic thing. So I think we can look at those triggers of, okay, basic human needs. Are we hungry, tired, dehydrated?
Yeah.
Um, that's important. We have to meet those needs. It's not a want. Food and water is not a luxury. It's a necessity for our brain to operate outside of the sense of survival.
That's a great point.
We have to be operating in that prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
We can't do that if we're dehydrated and starving. Our
Yeah.
body is only going to focus on survival.
Great
Same
point.
with sleep.
Yeah.
We have to sleep. That's a huge one. Identifying the other triggers, like you said, okay, not meeting the boxes, all the things that have to be done, right? Because our boxes sometimes equal what we are, our worthiness.
Yes.
If I don't meet my boxes, then I'm not of value and I'm not worthy.
Yep.
It can be a lot of different things for a lot of people. If you are unaware of your triggers,
Mhm.
what I would encourage you to do is be mindful and do body check-ins throughout the day. And so if you are, I have some clients who set timers for people that are really kind of detached from themselves and how they're
Mhm.
feeling or unaware of what the triggers are. Okay, we're going to set timers every 3 hours and you're just going to do a quick body scan. Am I tired, hungry, thirsty? Am I angry? Am I anxious? Where is that presenting in my body and why? Okay, I just had a really important conference call an hour ago and I am furious. Why am I furious? I felt unheard, I felt unseen, and I felt underappreciated. Okay, so those are some big triggers why you're having that major response.
Yeah.
So in parenting, if we are checking in with ourselves and we're like, man, I am so frustrated. Okay,
Yeah.
well, why am I frustrated? Because I'm feeling like my child isn't hearing me and listening. I'm feeling like I am not doing everything I should as a parent.
Yeah.
And therefore, I feel unworthy to be doing it. So I'm angry. Okay. Okay. So all of these things are giving us information. And then how we can pivot our own behavior, how we can meet these needs that we have in order to then come back and be more attuned, more mindful, more purposeful in our parenting.
Hey friends, I am loving summer and definitely don't want to rush this time, but fall will be here before we know it. And as you start to think about back to school, I want to encourage you to think about how you can be praying for your kids this coming school year. It's so easy to get caught up in all of the daily tasks of parenting, right? We're getting school supplies, coordinating schedules, doing the laundry, making snacks, then making more snacks, am I right? But as Christian parents, it's important to remember the big picture. The one thing that truly matters is teaching our kids to know, love, follow, and share Jesus. And so because of that, I am so excited to tell you that the Christian Parenting 2024-2025 Prayer Journal is now available. It's called A Life of Faith, Knowing, Loving, Following, and Sharing Jesus, and it is a prayer journal from Christian Parenting that was created just for you. This journal will guide you in praying over your kids every week of the coming school year. Together, we will pray that our children will know Jesus as their Savior, love Him with their hearts, minds, and strength, and follow Him faithfully through their entire lives, and boldly share His good news with others. Thousands of parents use this journal every year, so join us as together we pray that our kids live a full life of faith. You can visit cpgive.org to request your school year prayer journal, A Life of Faith. Again, that's cpgive.org and request your copy of A Life of Faith today. Now let's get back to the conversation. I love that.
I mean, that is so helpful and practical. And I mean, I have my phone here and I call it my mobile brain, right? And
Mhm.
so we can do that. I love this idea of setting timers and forcing ourselves to pause because we've got this thing dinging at us constantly. It's text messages, it's work reminders, it's calendar reminders.
Yeah.
Why not stick a calendar reminder in your mobile brain to just trigger that, hey, pause, reflect, what's going on with me right now?
Yeah.
Because what's going on with us is going to affect how we interact with others. And,
Yeah.
and that goes to that idea of reactivity. So I think that is fantastic, Kelly. I love that. Listeners, I'm going to like hold me accountable here. We need to I think set a goal for us to all participate in this and see how it changes our
Yeah.
day, right?
Absolutely. And if you're unfamiliar, if emotions, identifying emotions is something new to you, you can Google like the zones of regulation, and it'll just give you like 4 different kind of colors with emotions in each zone to give you vocabulary to what you're feeling.
Yeah,
And that's a great place to start. So when you are taking that break, when you're taking a moment, if this is something that's very new for you, please know it's new for a lot of us and
yeah,
we're all on this journey. But you can take a break, do a quick body scan, look at that, map, that zone of regulation to kind of be able to pinpoint and identify what you're feeling
yeah,
and then say, okay, how can I get regulated? How can I regulate myself to get to a healthier spot?
yeah.
So you're processing through, you're not ignoring what your body's telling you, you're not ignoring those emotions, you're managing them, you're working through them to come to a healthier place.
I love that. I think that's so fantastic. And that only stands to benefit not only ourselves, but everybody that we interact with on a regular basis, right? So that
And
we
you're teaching your kid.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, which is the goal. We want to improve, we want to grow, and we want to teach our kids in healthy ways. So, I have to ask this question because I think it's only fair, Kelly. Like, we have kids who are just masters at pushing our buttons, and
Mhm.
they can find those triggers, they can find those things that, where we might be working really, really hard. We're doing the body scan, like, we're really trying to be mindful, we're staying hydrated, we're trying to rest, we're doing all the disciplines, but yet there's just that one little thing that our kids know they can just get you. So, how can we respond to our kids who are masters at pushing our buttons to the point of a reactive response?
I think that's so good. So, one, yes to all of that. There are people in our lives, including sometimes our kids,
Mm,
who, yeah, can just know that button and
yeah,
keep pushing it.
yeah,
And sometimes they're pushing it because they want a response,
yeah.
because they want a reason not to trust you.
Mm, great point.
Like,
Right.
hey, I just got you to yell at me. See, I can't trust you. So
Yeah,
I think when they are masters, when our buttons are triggered, we have to have a plan to regulate ourselves.
yeah,
Um, if there is not an urgency and an emergency, like if someone's hurt, obviously that needs to be immediately
yeah.
responded to. Not everything else needs an immediate attention.
Okay.
It is okay for us to say, you know what? I'm really upset right now.
Yeah,
I need a minute. I need a minute to process why I'm upset. And then I'm going to come back and we can discuss this.
that's great.
I think oftentimes as parents, we are afraid that if we don't immediately address something, that we're going to lose it, right? That our kids are going to forget about it, or the kids are going to think it's okay to do that.
Right.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
We can circle back
Mhm.
when we're regulated, when our kid is regulated,
Yeah.
and have a more productive exchange.
That's so good. I agree with that. Absolutely. And yeah, because we do, especially for those of us that bend towards that fixer, type of attachment where we're like, no, we're going to deal with this and we're going to deal with it now. And it's my way or the highway. And you did wrong. And there's that reactive response. And you're right. For those kids who are looking for a reason not to trust, we just gave it to them.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to do that. And so our response rather than our reaction teaches so much in modeling that self-regulation and modeling verbalizing our feelings and still putting ownership on the child of you have done something to offend, you have done something to break relationship in this moment, but I'm not leaving you. I'm going to take a moment to regulate myself so that we can come back. Like you're talking about, I love that idea of circling back to it. And it is so helpful and it's so productive to come to the table and to come to a place in conversation where everyone is regulated and you're able just to verbalize instead of just that heat of the moment. So I
Yeah.
think that's so, so important, Kelly. I love that. And I think it's important for us to talk about this because there are ramifications of long-term habitual reactive parenting. And I don't want to say it goes without saying. I think we need to verbalize it. We need to hear it and be reminded of those ramifications of long-term reactive parenting. What is that, Kelly?
I think that's really important. I think that if we continue to be reactive, secure attachment cannot be built.
Right.
And we will constantly live in a state of a ruptured relationship.
Right.
And so, I think it's important to note that when we do rupture a relationship, it's an opportunity for us to go back and repair well.
Yeah,
You can repair very well.
that's
You
right.
can say, I should not have been angry. I should not have been so, um, disappointed, maybe,
Mm,
whatever the emotion is.
yeah.
I own that. And when we apologize, we don't need to include any buts. Like, yes, I was angry, but you did. No,
Yeah.
no. We're going to own our own stuff.
Yeah.
Our behavior is our responsibility. And when we do that, when we say, hey, I should not have been so angry, I apologize.
Mm,
How can I make it better?
hmm.
We're teaching our children how to apologize appropriately for the rest of their lives too, to
Right.
own it,
Yes.
to correct it, and to say, how can I make it better?
Yeah.
And I think the important thing, I want to circle back to, when you tell someone I need time, make it very specific when you're working with your kids.
Mm,
You don't want to leave this, we'll deal with this later.
mm.
That is going to really heighten their anxiety because it's unpredictable of when you're coming back.
It's a great point.
So set a time, like say, I need 10 minutes or I need to eat dinner first. And then after dinner, then let's have this conversation.
Love that.
But set a point that they know when we're going to circle back to. Because if you leave that open-ended, it's going to cause a lot of anxiety and often heighten their own response and their own reaction to you.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really great point in all of that because you do ideally you want to come back to that conversation for the purpose of healing and reconciliation. And if we're heightened, we can't do that. And
Yeah.
so that's a really, really great point. And I want you to unpack and maybe dive a little bit deeper into this idea of, some parents really struggle with apologizing to their children because they feel like it belittles their authority
Mhm.
over the child. And so, where is that balance of maintaining respect as the authority figure with our children, which I believe we are called to do? The scripture is very clear in honoring our father and our mother. So that authority is established, but also balancing that with humbling ourselves when we need to apologize when we've overreacted as parents.
Yeah. I think, we can even say that it's a lot easier to respect someone when they are humble, when
Yeah.
they acknowledge their own humanness, when they are authentic, and when they are vulnerable.
Yeah.
They're not separate, they're all inclusive.
Yeah.
I think we as adults can even look at those that we admire the most as leaders and be like, wow, they own their stuff. That's
Mm,
awesome.
yeah.
I love it when I hear a pastor say, I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
I'm like, fantastic, because I am too. um, and so I think it's an opportunity to model that life. People are not perfect, but when we are in healthy relationships, we can own what is imperfect and try to move towards a healthier response, a
Yeah.
healthier version of ourselves.
Yeah.
And to me, man, what more could be respectable? What more could be what a leader? Because you're showing them that I'm not asking you to be perfect.
Yeah.
I'm just asking you to acknowledge when we're not.
Yeah.
And when we make a mistake, okay, yeah, you're gonna make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's great. You're of course that you're a human being.
Yeah.
So what do we do when we make mistakes?
Right.
Being a humble leader of our child's life is so, so vital.
Mm,
And I think when we present as perfect, that is completely unattainable for our kids,
Yes.
and they're not going to be able to relate to that.
That's exactly right. Oh, I love that. That is a really, really great word, Kelly. So encouraging. There's just so much to everything that you've shared. It's just so impactful. I want to give you the opportunity as we close out this conversation and as we close out this amazing series that you have just been such a blessing for me personally, and I know our listeners as well. Give us some hope and encouragement, and maybe some first steps on the road to healing for those who feel like they are just stuck in this reactive
Mm.
parenting cycle.
Yeah. I think one, please know that you're not alone. And, if you're a Christian, I love that God gives us hope that nothing, nothing
Yeah.
can separate us from the love of God,
Amen.
not even our reactivity.
Right.
And that there is grace for us each and every day. And that God has so intricately and beautifully created our brains to
Mhm.
be able to learn and develop new pathways.
Yeah.
That's good news. That's gospel, man. That
Yeah.
God created us in such a way that we can change and evolve. And that God also created us in such a way to need community, and that it is good and it is sacred to ask for help.
Yeah.
So if there are trauma-informed therapists, there are trauma-informed coaches that can help you really move forward to a better place of healing and hope,
Mm.
and help you kind of navigate these murky waters. And so know that we're all starting from that place, and that we all need others to help us get to the place of a healthier version of ourselves, that we're not in this by ourselves. We are created to need others, and that is holy work.
Yes. That's fantastic. I love that. I'm thinking through everything that we have talked about over this series, and you had shared when we were talking specifically about the reactive parenting. There were 3 steps that you gave in the response to, because we're talking about don't be reactive, but be responsive. And I feel like we'd be remiss if I don't leave our listeners with that practical application component. You've given us hope, you've given us encouragement. Now close us out with those practical 3 steps in terms of responding as parents.
Yeah, I think that's good. So I think, the first step is just to get curious. Ask yourselves questions. What do I need? Do I need food, water, rest? Am I overstimulated myself? Do I need a break from all the noise, physical touch? What do I need?
Yeah.
And then 2, make a plan. Make a plan to meet that need. It may not be immediate. Your situation may not be immediate,
Right.
but say, okay, I really need 5 minutes of silence. So make a plan. Text your spouse, text a friend. Can you help me? I need 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think be consistent. Be consistent in trying. This is a skill that has to be learned. You may not know what you need yet.
Right.
That's okay.
That's good.
So be consistent to pursue learning. Be consistent in how you are communicating with yourself, how you're communicating with your kids. And so as you are learning these things, be curious with yourself. Say, what do I need? Make a plan. Be compassionate with yourself and make a plan to meet that need. And then just be consistent. Keep trying. Keep trying to figure out what helps you regulate. Keep trying if you haven't figured that out. Keep trying when you rupture. Come back and keep trying to be more mindful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so, so good. I love that. Very practical. And I'm going to make sure and have that in today's show notes for our listeners to go back to. And I want to make sure that our listeners can connect with and continue to follow, learn from you, and support you. Kelly, how can they do that?
Yeah, I would love to connect with anybody that wants more information. You can go to my website, theconnectedlife.co, or you can follow me on Instagram at the.kelly.hamilton.
Perfect. Listeners, I'll have those links in today's show notes as well so that you can quickly and easily access those. And my friend, I can't tell you what a pleasure it has been to get to know you and to get to learn from you. And the Lord has just gifted you with incredible and encouraging insight that is changing lives. And so thank you for your time and sharing with our listeners. It has been such a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.